Elisa, you get the final question.
Right.
Public confidence in the integrity and reliability of our election process is of paramount importance across our nation. However, every election cycle, a number of relatively isolated stories surface describing election fraud exploits that shake out our collective confidence in the system. Recently, there has been a push to eliminate voter ID requirements and an emphasis placed on significantly expanding mail-in ballots and remote electronic voting. What measures will you take to, one, preclude election ballot tampering, and two, bolster public confidence in the integrity of the voting process in the United States?
Can you repeat the first part of that? Not the first part of the question, but where you said first and then right before public confidence. Towards the end
right
of the actual
before public
question.
confidence?
Yeah.
All right. What
Towards the
measures
end
will you take to preclude election ballot tampering, and two, bolster public confidence in the integrity of the voting process in the United States?
Great. So this is very important because every vote counts, every voter matters, and we absolutely need to have hands down integrity with our electoral process, with our elections, from beginning to end. In fact, I've been a champion of accountability, integrity, transparency, even during this election cycle. Maybe it's the educator in me, making people aware of the process and the importance of voting. Unfortunately, in Virginia, we're now going to, after this primary cycle, be faced with some changes and some hardships that I really think are going to make a difference in our electoral process, swinging towards more fraud because they've removed the voter ID requirements. They're pushing the absentee voting for any reason at any time. And it's a volume of scale kind of question. Our military and certain ones are able to do that for employment reasons, and it works. But when we're talking about doing that nationwide or as a whole state, then we really have to talk about fraud with the absentee voting piece. And the remote electronic voting is just absurd. I mean, the Democrats want to talk about hacking when it's convenient to their narrative, but want to open it up for everybody and repeat voting and all of that. My family jokes, maybe it's a sick joke, but my grandparents always voted Republican, and now that they're passed, we're worried they're going to start showing up on Democratic voter rolls. And we've got to fight against that. And so I absolutely support strongly favorably the voter identification measures. To buy tobacco products, to buy alcohol, to go to a movie, in some cases, depending on what you're watching, to get a discount on a product, you have to show an ID. And I think that, with something so sacred as our right to vote, then we need to have those measures in place. And absentee voting only when the need presents itself. Otherwise, put on the hazmat suit and show up in person because you want your vote to count. And so in terms of bolstering public confidence, making those changes the way that it should be, the way the president advocates, and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Well, my little brother doesn't live in Virginia. He lives in North Dakota. But the other day he got his absentee ballot because North Dakota's on a everybody votes absentee this year. And he got two of them, and they both had his name on them. And so, he's like, what do I do? And I said, well, get rid of one of them and, vote with the other one. And he said, okay, but what does this mean for everybody else? And I said, what it means is that your vote is not sacred in North Dakota. And far too often what we've seen around the country is that if you don't have an ID and if you don't have a signature verification by somebody else on an absentee ballot, for instance, which is something they got rid of in Virginia this year, as you know, then what happens is there's widespread voter fraud. And voter fraud, by the way, in Michigan or North Dakota or California affects us right here in Virginia, because ultimately if the president is elected and he quote unquote loses the popular vote, even though there's no such thing as a popular vote, the left uses that to discredit him as they've done with President Trump this entire time. So your vote is the single most sacred thing you have in a constitutional republic like ours. And so anything we can do to strengthen the voter system, encourage in-person voting, I'm actually in favor of, there's this idea that somehow some poor people don't have money to get an ID because of all of that. I'm in favor of giving everybody a $50 voucher as long as it's used on going and getting an ID. I mean, let's go out of our way to make sure that we have IDs for everybody so that everybody can vote. I mean, we as Republicans of anybody should be in favor of people voting, but let's go out of our way to help make sure that we secure our system, because there's nothing more sacred than to vote. And it's not something to be toyed with. It's a very serious problem here in Virginia and around the country.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Tom?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that what this is this is the nanny state at its worst. You know, where they're telling you that you're incapable of getting an ID, and you know you don't need a you don't need a second signature to prove your. This is all nanny state stuff. This is all Democrat ploy to essentially continue to diminish our liberty and to control people. That's really what this is. So I'm absolutely in favor of in-person voting and absentee voting for those people who literally cannot get out of their homes to go and vote. And I think that it's all a fallacy. It's all nanny state Democrat narrative that continues to promote these things. And I think that these arguments are starting to lose their traction. I think that's why the votes are starting to move towards Republicans, because they know that this is these are all they're lies. They're going to stuff ballots. If you have mail-in ballots, they're going to stuff ballots. So we absolutely need in-person voting. We need voter ID. These are very basic principles. You know, Daniel's 100% right. This is the most sacred responsibility we have of citizens in our country. Even if you're not involved on a daily basis in understanding what's going on, you've got to have access to the ballot booth, and you've got to also become an informed voter. To some degree, you've got to become an informed voter. And, you know, with the nature of our lives today, it's very, very complicated. But the one thing that has to be preserved is the ability for people to vote. And, you know, I'm not even opposed to giving them, you know, a $50 voucher. I just don't think it should be necessary. That's more of the nanny state, making it possible for people to vote. They already have that possibility. They already do that to buy alcohol or to drive cars, or, you know, so it's just more of the nanny state. We need in-person voting, and I believe in paper ballots as well as backups.
Okay, thanks, Tom. This concludes the question and answer portion of this